Oh my God! Oh my God! Okay, I need an ambulance right here. Right here. The guy T-boned.
He was screaming in the street. He looked frustrated, panicked, confused.
A lot of females screaming. I mean, it's Halloween, but it was an eerie scream.
I saw like 3 or 4 people lying on the side of Stuyvesant High School, all covered in blood. At first, I thought that this is some sort of a Halloween prank.
I want to commend the response of our NYPD officer that was on post near the location who stopped the carnage moments after it began.
We just looked outside the window and they were just laying there like dead.
New Yorkers, be New Yorkers and live your life, and don't let them change us or deter us.
This is going to be the new sort of age or chapter of terror that we're going to see are these vehicles, these knives, and explosive devices.
We have to stay on offense. We can only do so much defense against these types of attacks.
When are we going to have an honest discussion about this?
It is Wednesday, November 1st. A Fox News alert. Terror in downtown Manhattan. Breaking overnight, authorities swarming 2 different New Jersey locations, searching for clues in a horrifying ISIS-inspired attack.
The attacker, an Uber driver screaming Allahu Akbar, in custody at this hour as police piece together the evidence.
I'm Jillian Neely.
And I'm Todd Pyro in for Rob Schmidt. Straight now to a Fox News alert and that deadly attack. A rented Home Depot truck plowing through pedestrians, slamming into cars and crumbling bikes in New York City.
The driver deliberately mowing people down on a bike path for nearly a mile, ending not far from Ground Zero. At least 8 people are dead, many more injured, several children included in that number.
Let's take a live look right now at the scene in New York City at this hour. It is calm right now, but just a few hours ago, it was not so. We have live Fox News team coverage for you.
That's right. We begin with Rob Schmidt live at the scene of the deadliest attack in New York since 9/11. Rob.
Good morning to you guys from Tribeca. We are here, and just we're going to get you caught up on the latest after a very tragic day yesterday, a tragic afternoon. 8 people killed, 11 people injured. It all happened about a block away from here in Lower Manhattan, about a block that way, right on the Hudson River, and a bike path there. But let's get you caught up on the latest. As I said, 29-year-old Sayfullo Saipov. Let's pull up the picture of the suspect in all this. He has been arrested. He is in the hospital recovering for a gunshot wound. He is an Uzbek national from Uzbekistan, came here to the country, to the United States and Florida on a diversity visa back in 2010, and overnight some pretty serious developments in this. Police and federal investigators scouring 2 locations in New Jersey. The first one in Paterson, New Jersey, which is only about 15 miles outside of the city. An apartment complex and a mosque in that area have been scoured this morning, as well as other residences. This is very likely where this man lived, we understand, Saipov. The other location, a Home Depot in Passaic, where this truck was rented by Saipov, the truck that was used in this horrible attack, and also in that location, his white van, we understand. He was an Uber driver living here in New Jersey and working for Uber. 8 killed, 11 hurt after he rented that truck from that Home Depot in New Jersey and then drove it likely through the Holland Tunnel into the city, and then moved south on the West Side Highway, pulling up onto a bike path and mowing down a number of people as they biked, as they jogged on this path right on the Hudson River. Just a terrible story. He also then ended the spree by smashing into a school bus, injuring 2 kids and 2 adults on that bus, and then running out with 2 fake guns of some sort, maybe BB guns, screaming Allahu Akbar, and the panic continued from there until police shot him. And last night on a special report, Congressman Michael McCall said that there was a very interesting hint, an indication that this might have been coming in a photo that was posted on the internet back in August. Let's go ahead and listen to him.
We saw a picture of a cell phone at the scene of where this happened a month ago, or around August time frame, with an ISIS logo, sort of predicting that this may happen. And I think investigators are looking at that photo to find out it was posted on the website of ISIS in August. And so that's something that investigators are looking at right now in terms of, are there other people involved?
So an eerie indication there of things that were to come. That photo taken in almost the exact location where the attack happened. Saipov, as I told you, was shot and injured. He is in the hospital. Police are going to interrogate him very strongly, I assume, and also his wife and 2 kids who live in New Jersey. And we do understand that there were letters found at the scene that declared his alliance with ISIS. Guys, we'll send it back to you in the studio.
All right, Rob, thank you. And brand new details about the terror suspect, a 29-year-old Uber driver who was in the country on a diversity visa.
Garrett Tenney continues our live team coverage from Lower Manhattan. Garrett.
Well, Todd and Jillian, I can tell you investigators are now working on building out the profile of 29 Saifullah Saipov, and they're trying to figure out where exactly he's been over the last 7 years, who he's been in contact with, and what it is that led him to carry out this attack. What we know at this point is that he's been in a number of places since he came over from his home country of Uzbekistan on a green card in 2010. We know that most recently he has been in Paterson, New Jersey, where he lived with his wife and 2 kids, and that's where the FBI was conducting several searches last night as they were there in that area, as well as the parking lot of the Home Depot where he rented this truck from. We also know that he has previous connections to the Tampa area, and we know that the FBI was there around an apartment where he had an address, conducting searches and interviews there, looking for anyone who had contact with him. One friend of his, when he lived there, told Fox News that at the time he was a very happy-go-lucky kind of guy, that he was very hardworking, and that he was very kind and friendly, and that's what we often hear in these types of attacks, where you have an individual who is radicalized at some point. We don't know if that's the case here, but law enforcement officials are saying that all indicators are pointing in that direction at this point. The AP is also reporting that it appears when he first came into the country that he was in the Cleveland, Ohio area, living with either friends or family, and that's where he had a trucking business. More recently, he was an Uber driver. We know in 2015 that he received a fine by Highway Patrol in Missouri for some mechanical issues with a truck that he was driving, and he was arrested a year later because he didn't pay that fine. But other than that, there is no lengthy criminal history that we found at this point. But there's also questions about the visa program through which he came through, and that is something Mark Levin talked about last night.
50,000 people a year come in here through the diversity visa program, because the diversity visa program was set up, you see, to make sure that underrepresented countries can send their people into this country too. And he did that in 2010.
Now, Saifullah Saipov did undergo surgery last night for the 2 gunshot wounds that he received by a police officer that stopped him from carrying out this attack anymore. And we are told that that surgery was successful. He's expected to recover, and investigators are going to have a lot more questions for him in the days ahead. Jillian and Todd.
Garrett Tenney live for us in Lower Manhattan. Garrett, thank you. New information emerging overnight about the victims of this terrifying truck attack. 8 people dead, 11 injured, but expected to survive. Among the dead, 5 Argentinians. They were in New York City celebrating their 30th high school reunion, and they had just rented bicycles moments before being mowed down. A Belgian tourist visiting with her family also killed. The other 2 victims not yet identified. 2 New York school staff members and 2 students on the bus that was hit are injured. One of those students in critical condition at this hour.
New York's annual Halloween parade going on as scheduled just hours after the terror attack. Tight security lining the parade route in Greenwich Village. More than 10,000 people flooding the streets. Extra officers heavily armed along with sand trucks forming protective barriers along the route. Many people in attendance saying they refuse to live in fear.
Following yesterday's attack, President Trump tweeting, quote, "I have just ordered Homeland Security to step up our already extreme vetting program. Being politically correct is fine, but not for this."
So the big question now, are we doing all we can to fight terror around the world, and what needs to change? Here to weigh in, former U.S. Army CIA-trained senior intelligence operative, Colonel Tony Shaffer. Thank you for joining us this morning. So we'll start with the big question. In your opinion, what needs to change, and what needs to change right away?
Well, first off, Governor Cuomo is wrong. This is not a quote-unquote lone wolf. I mean, how many lone wolves globally do you need to see that there's a pattern here? This is a known ISIS tactic. Got to get that through our head. We need to look at this both ways. We need to look at what we could have prevented, what we could have done to do more to stop this. We need to look at why this guy was here. President Trump is completely correct regarding his vetting program. This guy, look, this guy's name is, the first name is Islamic, is the sword of Allah. That should be a clue. You know, we should be looking like, why is this guy here? And also, what could we have done to be more aggressive to detect this early on. Clearly, NYPD was way ahead of the curve. And the other thing, NYPD stops more of these attacks than we know. They are very effective. They can't stop everything, though. They were going in the right direction. So that's what we'd have to look at in the past, future. We have to get inside the networks of these guys. We have to get inside their heads. The way you defeat a network is by penetrating the network. You have to do that through good intelligence, good police work, good spying, and you have to look at what they're doing social media-wise. And this is nothing against, this is not about religious profiling. As Bernie Carrick said earlier, we've got to look at how some of these guys use technology, and you can do it through any number of ways of profiling that has nothing to do with religion. And then further, as we move forward, we have to deny ISIS a base of operations, and we have to also start attacking their message, attacking the roots of the concept of why Islam has a radical element. And you have to have Islam go in the direction of a reformation of some sort.
Lieutenant Colonel Schaefer, to the individual who's not necessarily in intelligence like myself, I'm trying to think of this through this prism. It looks like this is just a guy who at 2 o'clock decided to go to a Home Depot and then at 3:05 ran down a bunch of people. My question for you, how can the best intelligence in the world prevent that guy from doing that, knowing, okay, this is about to happen, let's get our resources in place to prevent this from happening?
Look, I have to believe, based on the time frame, he came here in 2010, that there was some level of radicalization already in his background. We see these people on the radar all the time. The differentiator we have to find out is what pushes them to act. And we've seen, look, in the cab of his truck, he had an ISIS manifesto, essentially, a note that says he's doing this because of ISIS. Something pushed him during the time between when he got here and the time he acted. He had kids, he was an Uber driver, he did all these different things which to blend in, but arguably something set him aside. The way you figure that out is by having these folks on the radar. And look, he probably telegraphed this to somebody he knows close to him. That's where good intelligence comes in. I'm not saying we need to have an Orwellian society where we monitor everybody. We do know where pockets of these folks exist, and that's where we need to look. And the other thing I'll say is the NYPD has certain techniques that Mayor de Blasio needs to get over himself and let them do their job. NYPD has been very effective. There's constant pushback from the liberal side on not allowing NYPD and others to do their job. And this is where clearly, we need to let them do their job to figure out how to keep New Yorkers and, frankly, the United States safe.
Absolutely. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer, thank you so much for your insight and for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
It's been his goal since the beginning, making America safe again.
Nor can we let the hateful ideology of radical Islam be allowed to reside or spread within our own countries.
President Trump now doubling down on his push for extreme vetting, as Democrats call it discriminatory. We're live in Washington with reaction from the White House next. "16 minutes after the hour now, terror in Lower Manhattan, just steps from ground zero. A truck plowing through a crowd, and the man behind the wheel, an immigrant here on what's called a diversity visa."
That's right. President Trump now ordering DHS to ramp up extreme vetting even more. Griff Jenkins is live in Washington, D.C. with that part of the story. Good morning, Griff.
Good morning, Jillian and Todd. A swift response from the president using his preferred means of direct communication with the American people, first reacting in a series of tweets. He wrote, "In New York City, looks like another attack by a very sick and deranged person. Law enforcement is following this closely. Not in the USA." Continued, "We must not allow ISIS to return or enter our country after defeating them in the Middle East and elsewhere. Enough." Then announcing actions he's taken, writing, "I have just ordered Homeland Security to step up our already extreme vetting program. Being politically correct is fine, but not for this." Now, we will learn more about what the president means by that, but in the latest executive order on the travel to the United States, Uzbekistan, where this attacker came from in 2010, is not on the list of some 11 countries currently receiving enhanced vetting measures. But it is a largely Muslim country, and like his original travel order, which was labeled a Muslim ban by critics, this latest action will likely receive scrutiny. Reaction from lawmakers like Lindsey Graham, who had this to say.
So I talked with the president tonight. He is right to make sure that when somebody comes into our country from a place where radical Islam, and that's the enemy, thrives, that we're going to ask extra hard questions. He's also right to look at this as a war.
Finally, the First Lady also took to Twitter. She was in New York yesterday writing, "My heart breaks for New York City." She returns to the White House today. Todd, Jillian?
You know, Griff, I was doing a lot of reading about this diversity visa program and the fact that, you know, in a year, it can provide up to 50,000 people permanent residence into the United States. They're selected randomly. Griff, I understand they have to go through interviews. They have to have a high school degree or equivalent of. They have to have work experience. But a lot of people are saying at this point in time, in 2017, this program just doesn't serve our national interest.
You know, that's right, Jillian. And one of the things, a key element they're going to be looking at in this enhanced interrogation or vetting measures, I should say, is simply the social media aspect. The number of some 45,000 admissions of refugees that you mentioned there. It was double under the Obama administration, but now it's going to be much less. And they're going to take a deeper dive into the social media, which we may yet learn there were signs from this attacker.
Right. Absolutely. Thanks, Griff.
Expect to hear a lot more about diversity visas over the course of the next couple days and months. Griff, thanks. Time now is 18 minutes after the hour. How did we get to this point in the war on terror?
Critics point to 8 years of refusing to call the enemy what it is, Islamic terror.
What exactly would using this label accomplish? What exactly would it change?
But now President Trump says the time for political correctness is over.
Our next guest, who has interrogated the world's worst terrorists, saying taking a hard stance is the only way to save lives. More Fox and Friends first when we return.
The president ordering more extreme vetting following the terror attack, New York City's deadliest one since 9/11. Our next guest has interrogated radical Islamic terrorists face to face and warns our PC culture is putting us in danger for more of them.
Former CIA interrogator Dr. James Mitchell is the author of Enhanced Interrogation and helped the CIA put together its program. He joins us now to explain. Good to see you as always, Dr. Mitchell. Unfortunately, it is always in circumstances like these. Let's get right to it. Explain how the PC culture is to blame for what happened yesterday.
We're hearing another channel.
Can you hear us, Dr. Mitchell?
I think we're hearing Fox Business.
Oh, he's hearing Fox Business.
Okay.
All right.
Have to get back to him in a little bit. But, you know, he's just one of the many guests that we have on here this morning to talk about, you know, everything that he's dealt with, that he's seen in talking to some of these people face to face, the experiences that he's had, and why we're not doing enough in this country right now because of that PC culture.
And what gets so disappointing is that it seems like you're in a situation where we have Dr. Mitchell on, we have Aaron Cohen on after all these things, and we ask them the same questions. And you hope at some point we get some of these changes. Let's go back to Dr. Mitchell now. We have him on the line. Do you hear us, Dr. Mitchell?
I can hear you fine, thanks.
All right, let's get right to that question again. Explain how our PC culture is to blame for what we saw yesterday.
Well, I think we're working on the wrong end of the radicalization pipeline. We're playing whack-a-mole as people are being radicalized and trying to catch them, but we're allowing into our country the violent ideology and the people who are susceptible to responding to that ideology. You know, the core problem lies at the way that the current versions of the Quran and the Hadiths and the violence that are in that are accepted as being the true word of Allah passed down unerringly, and our PC culture prevents us from challenging that. Our PC culture also prevents us from doing the kind of vetting that needs to be done to stop both that ideology and the people getting into our country. And then finally, our PC culture prevents us from being able to surveil and monitor. You know, there's an NSA sunset, it's called 702, that's going to sunset in December. Imagine that there are 3 terrorists. Terrorist 1 is talking to Terrorist 2 about Terrorist 3. We can no longer collect that information. There are groups in the United States and Congress people in the United States who want to severely cut back on the amount of information that we can collect.
Dr. Mitchell,
let me make one more point.
Sure.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed told me that our PC, our political correctness and our tolerance and our religious freedom really acted like a cloaking device that allowed them to enter our country and put in place the mechanisms to attack us without us ever doing anything about it.
Okay, so in your opinion, give us some specifics. You talk about better vetting. What, in your opinion, needs to be done? What lengths do we need to go to?
Well, in terms of vetting, I think what we should do is not let people in who answer questions that suggest that they're susceptible to this violent ideology. If you look at the Pew polls and other polls that have been done that have looked at the ideology, you'll see that in some cases 50, 60, 70% of some versions of Islam endorse the idea that people should be stoned or apostates should be killed or that Jews should be ran off the earth. I don't think we should be letting those people in our country because they're susceptible to the ideology. The other thing that happens, and we haven't really said it, is that ISIS has been very successful at setting up a virtual caliphate. We're going to attack them in their homeland in Syria where they've tried to set it up. But that's not where the danger is. The danger is on the internet. And what we should be doing is hunting down the people who are funding that and making them pay for this.
Yeah, Dr. Mitchell, let's build upon that because if you listen to news reports, we're doing very well overseas against ISIS, but that has negative ramifications here, quite frankly. How do we bridge the gap there so that we're both successful overseas and then that translates to protecting our homeland?
It's a generational war. The problem is, again, we're working at the wrong end of that pipeline. We have to realize that we got to hunt down, find, kill, try, put in jail, all those people in a defensive way. But at the other end of that pipeline, you have to instill American values into those people that we're raising. You can't raise a generation of people and tell them that America is a horrible outlaw that's doing terrible things to the world and expect them not to be susceptible to this other ideology. We have to start stopping the importing of that ideology. We have to quit allowing radical mosques to be built, and we have to stop allowing those people in the Middle East who are trying to conquer the world by pushing their ideology out into Western democracies. We have to stop them from doing that. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to do this for generations and generations, and they will eventually beat us.
And continue to have this conversation. That's another thing, too. Dr. James Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
You know, we've had this conversation countless times over the last year and a half to 2 years,
and
which
we continue
is
to
tragic.
do so, and we will continue to do so, unfortunately.
Moments of horror just revealed as officers swarm the scene of the attack.
So is there a way for police to prevent truck attacks like these? Our next guest, a former NYPD lieutenant who specializes in terror with how drones could help when Fox and Friends. A Fox News alert now, terror in Manhattan. 8 people killed, plowed down on a bike path by a rented pickup truck.
The driver, an ISIS-inspired terrorist, screaming Allah Akbar. Garrett Tenney is live at the scene with brand new details about the suspect. Garrett.
Well, Todd and Jillian, good morning to you. Federal law enforcement sources tell us that they believe that this was a lone wolf attack at this point, at least, and that the man responsible, the 29-year-old man from Uzbekistan, that he acted alone. Let's take a look at that man, 29-year-old Saifullo Saipov. This morning, at least 8 people are dead and at least 12 are wounded after he drove a truck onto a bike path here in Lower Manhattan, plowing through runners and bikers for nearly a mile before he eventually crashed into a school bus. He then yelled Allahu Akbar as he got out of the truck with 2 fake guns. Police shot him twice and took him into custody. And in and around that van, they found 2 handwritten notes pledging his loyalty to ISIS. Saipov came to the U.S. on a green card in 2010 from his home country of Uzbekistan. And at this point, it's not clear if he was on the radar of law enforcement prior to this attack, though investigators are now looking into all of this. We know that he has an address most recently in New Jersey. FBI was there searching that home last night. We were told that he lived there with his wife and 2 kids. Previously, he lived in Florida as well as Ohio, where he had 2 commercial truck driving businesses that he registered. More recently, he worked as an Uber driver. Uber tells us that he passed their background check and that he has now been suspended from that service, and they say they are cooperating with the FBI and investigators as well in this case. We do know he is now in the hospital. He was shot twice by a police officer who ended this attack. We're told that his surgeries were successful and that he is expected to recover. Investigators are going to have a whole lot of questions for him, and a lot of folks still there in the hospital, at least 12 injured, some of them critically, and are fighting for their lives. Todd and Jillian.
Garrett Tenney live at the scene for us this morning. Thank you. Dr. Darren Porcher is a former U.S. Army officer and NYPD lieutenant who specializes in counter-terror strategies at home and abroad.
He joins us with more on what police departments like the NYPD need to do to stop these attacks. Dr. Porcher, as always, thank you for being here. And I want to start off by asking, what are the red flags that police departments look for in situations like this?
Well, the chatter. Oftentimes people will introduce a narrative that someone is a part of something that is something that's bad, so to speak. So that information comes to a police department and they'll start a file. They'll start the investigation. Oftentimes when we think about radical Islam, this is a very small and minute component of Islam. This is a disenfranchised population. Therefore, it's necessary for law enforcement to try to connect with these people as best as possible, but utilize the structure of that Islamic community as a partnership. That symbiotic relationship is how we can effectively get to that disenfranchised population that commits these horrific acts of terrorism.
Look, it seems like every couple weeks unfortunately, we're talking about a situation like this. There have been 9 ISIS-directed or inspired vehicle attacks since the one in Nice, France, just about a year and a half ago in July of 2016. In the summer of 2017, just a couple months ago here in New York City, a driver mowed down a couple of people in Times Square. You had those barricades up, though, that were fortunately able to save a lot of people. But you can't have that up everywhere. So what else do you guys do?
Well, one of the recommendations that I see that's moving forward with the nuances and technological advancements in policing are the drones. The drones are an effective and inexpensive means of providing a sense of omnipresence and an information exchange, such as if we put a drone up, we can see what's happening and we can transmit that information to police sources that can effectively dispatch the resources necessary. We have to take in consideration the Homeland Security Chair McCall stated last, I want to say in August, that there was an ISIS video up that stated that this was an area that they had that produced a propensity for an attack. If we had a drone up, we could have got that information out and we could have just surveyed the scene. It's an arduous process to vet all of these sources that come in. However, we need as many resources as possible, and I see the drones as the cheapest way of doing it.
And to be clear, not to jump in on you, Todd, but just a couple months ago, the driver that I referenced, that was not terror-related, that was determined, but just an example of how it's hard to control these vehicles on the streets that are hitting people.
Right. You know, one of the things is you mentioned the steel balance in Times Square when we had that vehicle attack. The NYPD is now proliferating these steel balance throughout the city. So it's just going to be a matter of time before we have these steel balance up. And that could have assisted us with this situation here. But it goes back to that's only one cog in the mechanism of change and moving forth with the nuances in policing.
I know we're very early on in the investigation at this point in time, but in your experience, do you think this individual was known to police?
I believe that he was part of a social network that had an understanding of what happened. In addition to that, I believe that this individual was on the radar. They just may not have had enough information to move forward with a more credible surveillance, so to speak, because, like I said, it's an arduous task and it takes immense resources to vet a source, conduct surveillance, etc. This is something that went back, I want to say it was a year ago. Mayor de Blasio pulled a surveillance in these mosques. I thought that was a very valuable tool for us as law enforcement. But unfortunately, the powers that be, the political powers, chose otherwise. This may be a teachable moment for law enforcement and the mayor for how we should effectively address these types of issues.
And we haven't had this truck attack on U.S. soil until yesterday. Maybe this is the thing that pushes the de Blasio administration over the finish line.
Dr. Don Porcher, thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, how cities across the country are stepping up security in the wake of this deadly terror attack in New York City.
Plus, happening right now, police swarming the New Jersey home of the accused terrorist. We're live right outside his home. Coming up. Back now at the Fox News Alert and the chilling police calls as the terror attack unfolded in New York City.
Officers responding to chaos and carnage moments after a terror suspect rammed into people on a bike path.
Central, be advised, we have multiple people on the ground from Chambers all the way up to Houston. All the way from Houston to Chambers. This is a mass casualty situation here.
8 people killed in that attack.
Cities around the country now stepping up security. Extra police officers assigned to protect the famous Halloween parade in San Francisco and a celebration in Salem, Massachusetts.
Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles also adding more officers on the ground last night for Game 6 and again tonight for Game 7 of the World Series. The investigation into the terror suspect intensifying overnight, both here in New York and down in Florida.
Right. Fox 13's Kelly Cowan is live outside the suspect's last known address in Tampa. What do you know this morning, Kelly?
Hey, good morning to you both. It is unclear just how long the suspect lived here or possibly still had this as a current address. But what we do know is this came up on a public record search and that FBI agents were here yesterday searching the building behind me. They were focused on one unit in particular. Now, they wouldn't say exactly why they were here or what they were looking for. But when we spoke to neighbors, they said that they were going door to door to ask if anyone knew anything about Saipov. Now, law enforcement officials have told the Associated Press that while Saipov had a Florida driver's license, they believe he may have actually been staying in New Jersey prior to yesterday's attack. So it's unclear just how long Saipov may have called Tampa home. But what we do know about him so far is that he came to the U.S. from Uzbekistan legally in 2010. It's believed that he first lived in Ohio after his arrival, and at some point he moved to Florida and had this as one of his known addresses. We asked several neighbors whether or not they recognized him. We showed him the photo that was released yesterday. It was unclear whether or not any of these neighbors knew anything about him or even knew him at all. This is a hardworking neighborhood. We're told by those residents that live here that they simply go to work, they come home, they spend time with their families, but they don't really interact with their neighbors. So it was unclear whether anybody here knew him at all. And at this point, it's unclear how long exactly he called this address home. Guys.
Kelly Cowan from Fox 13 there in Tampa. Kelly, thank you very much. Next, Tampa, not the suspect's only known address. He also has ties to New Jersey, and we are there live next.
Plus, as police retrace the steps of a terrorist, could all the carnage have been prevented?
We visited over 148 truck rental locations in this area, the obvious ones, U-Haul, Ryder, Home Depot, etc.
Our next guest was a member of an elite group protecting one of the most active terror targets in the world. Aaron Cohen on Israel's strategies to protect soft targets is next.
Authorities descending on 2 New Jersey locations overnight linked to the terror suspect shot and arrested after killing 8 people with a truck.
FBI on scene at Home Depot where the truck was rented and at his home in Paterson, New Jersey. And that is exactly where Fox 5's Liz Dallum is located this morning. Liz, what can you tell us this morning?
Good morning to you, Jillian and Todd. We are here on Genesee Avenue in Paterson, New Jersey, where the FBI has this area entirely blocked off. Investigators have been going inside of Saipov's home. He lived in the 2nd floor of this brick building you see here with his wife and children. Investigators are gathering everything they can about Saipov. He's 29 years old, and his home is just steps away from the Omar Mosque. This house of worship was among several in New Jersey the NYPD had under under a broad surveillance since 2005 to identify what police called budding terrorist conspiracies. Now, Saipov rented the truck used in this deadly attack at a Home Depot in Passaic, New Jersey, not far from here, just 1 hour before that attack took place. Investigators had the parking lot of that Home Depot cornered off, looking for clues. We're told Saipov also worked as an Uber driver for 6 months and made more than 1,400 trips. Uber says Saipov did pass a background check, and it's now working with the FBI to provide his driving history. And apparently there have been no red flags found in their preliminary investigation just yet. Now, Saipov, of course, did have that encounter with police down in Tribeca and was shot in the abdomen. He was taken to Bellevue Hospital, where he's still recovering. Unclear whether or not police have been able to interrogate him this morning. We're live in Paterson, New Jersey. Todd and Jillian, over to you.
All right, Liz Dom, thank you very much. This is not the first incident where a vehicle has been turned into a murder machine.
Our next guest has some ideas on how to prevent it from happening again. Former member of the Israeli Special Operations Counterterrorism Unit, Aaron Cohen, joins us now. Aaron, as always, good to see you, but again, under circumstances like this. Last time we spoke, I believe it was during the Barcelona attack, and we mentioned Jersey barriers, or those stanchions that pop up. Are we in a situation now where we really need those in every single public area in every single city and town in America?
Well, I think if there would have been bollards or some type of vehicle-proof stanchions along that walkway, then a car couldn't have pulled up there and crashed into 8 people and killed them. That's the reality. I want to talk a little bit just about the types of measures that we use in Israel and how Israel has looked at its security for counterterror. Terrorism had to become an obsession in Israel. And this isn't the first time we've seen a vehicular murder. We've seen, what is it, about a half a dozen of these over the summertime, like you said, when I was on discussing these. The fact is that de Blasio has to turn up the heat, and if he doesn't, he's failing the citizens in New York. And what I mean by that is you can expand the Israeli model by doing a couple different things. One, looking at all of the different places where soft targets fester, wherever there's large crowds of people, Central Park, wherever vehicles can access those large crowds of people, you just need to get some bollards in place. But Israel goes a step further. We obsess about our off-duty and plainclothes law enforcement. Here in the U.S., we're a little more step back for liability reasons because they're not in uniform. They don't want them to get shot by accident if they end up responding, even though they're armed. In Israel, we look at our off-duty as a critical security layer, and they go through an additional 40 to 100 hours of active shooter counter-terror tactical response training. And there's over 1 million sworn law enforcement officers, guys, here in this country. Think about it. There can only be so many cops on duty, which leaves us with how many hundreds of thousands off duty. NYPD can't do it all while they're in uniform. But 3, to no end to its own, we have deployed undercover counter-terror units, which the NYPD has begun doing, to be able to understand and crack the culture and the mindset. And the only way to really start to put the heat on terrorism is to bolster the defense. And the reason why intelligence gathering takes years to become experts in. So if it's going to take us another 10 to 20 years to figure this out, which it very well could, the defense has to be realistic, and I think everybody here is tired of bad security in this country. It's time to put the bollards. It's time to boost the personal security from the private companies and get them in those places where bags can be checked. And let's get the bollards up and let's get the police the assistance they need. They can't do everything.
Well, and I think people are also tired of talking about yet another vehicle attack. This is the 9th ISIS-inspired or directed one since July of last year. So my question to you is, as regular civilians, as people who walk these streets every single day, like millions of other Americans, what can we be doing?
Well, you're limited to what you can do with a terrorist. Let me tell you how you take down a terrorist. In my unit, we're trained to shoot at the center mass with a firearm. The center mass, because it's the biggest target, causes the terrorist to go down. We then run up and we fire around into the center of the nose, which hits the brainstem. It's not personal. We're not trying to kill him. We're just trying to keep his hands from moving so he can't detonate a bomb, drive a truck, fire an AK-47 that's fully automatic into a crowd of people. But that's armed response. And the city of New York does not allow civilians to be able to carry weapons. I will say this. A properly armed, trained civilian could have saved lives. But New York isn't ready to go there.
Aaron,
Los Angeles
I'm sorry
isn't
to
ready
cut
to
you
go
off,
there.
but we are up against a hard break. We're going to lose you. Thank you
Understood.
for joining us this morning, and we'll be right
Understood.
back.
We'll be right back.
BP develops new